Steady reverence. Mira first noticed the pattern on a Tuesday morning, between a hurried train ride and the corner cafe where she skimmed emails and sipped coffee that was never quite hot enough. She taught creative writing at a small community college, but more than books and assignments. She watched how people carried ideas like fragile vessels. Some cradled them gently. Others tossed them like garbage. There was a rhythm to belief. She realized the one who speaks a truth sets a tone. The one who receives it decides whether that tone will become music or noise. One evening, after a workshop, a student named Jonah stayed behind. Jonah. He had a quiet look, the sort that comes from holding many thoughts at once. You say truth like it's a finished thing, he told Mira. But it seems to change depending on who tells it. He tapped his phone, showing a thread where an old article was quoted to justify a new idea. Which truth do I follow? Mira didn't answer with a lecture. She put her stack of student papers aside and said, maybe truth isn't only what someone says. Maybe truth becomes something else when it's taken into daily life. She pushed her cup forward. If you receive a truthful idea, how do you treat it? As a thing to guard, or as a thing to practice? Jonah frowned, still half unsatisfied. Practice? Yes, Mira said. Devotion doesn't have to be religious. It can be a way of living steady, respectful, and equal in how we apply it. Over the next weeks, she watched more closely. At the city market, an old man, Mr. Alvarez, had a stall of battered books. He sold them for little, stories in all states of repair. People bought them and treated them as if they were relics for show, never to be read. One afternoon, Mira asked him why he kept them despite the low prices. Because they tell me something about people, he said. I read a book a little every day. It keeps me honest. He pointed to a family across the market, helping their child choose a picture book. If you handle a book with reverence, that habit extends. You learn to handle people the same way. Mira thought of Jonah, and of how quick people were to share a quote or a headline without trying it on, without rehearsing it in the private experiment of living. She started to give her students a different assignment, not only to write about ideas, but to try one in their life and report back in small, practical details: what they changed, how it made them pause, what they did the next time. The results surprised her. A young barista named Sam wrote about treating every customer like the first customer of the day: calm, courteous, fully present. At first it felt fake. Then, he found it changed the flow of his shifts. An older student, Layla, took a proverb she had always dismissed as trite and practiced it: listen twice, speak once. She discovered that her relationships softened. Her teenage son began to speak more openly because she had stopped finishing his sentences. Mira realized truth, when treated as practice rather than prescription, asks for patience and equality. It does not rank one life as more worthy of the lesson than another. She began to call this approach steady reverence, a way of honoring an idea by making it habitual, and honoring people by assuming each is capable of change. The idea spread unintentionally. Jonah returned, embarrassed and bright-eyed. He had tried a morning ritual, 5 minutes of stillness before his frantic schedule. I thought it was silly, he admitted, but it made me notice how often I rushed past kindness. He now paused before interrupting. He found his friends listened more. 2. One day, a post went viral from a public figure who spoke about compassion in polished paragraphs. For a while, it felt like an echo chamber: grand language, gestures of performative virtue, neat hashtags. Some people applauded. Others used the post to score points in debates. Mira watched the parade with concern. She knew that public truth can be flashy. The real test was whether ordinary people would take it home and let it shape a single small action every day. A neighbor, a nurse named Priya, practiced a different truth quietly. After every shift, she let herself slow for 3 deep breaths before stepping into the elevator. She did this to leave the ward's urgency at work. But then she noticed something. She began to treat strangers with the same steadiness, holding doors a moment longer, thanking janitors by name, answering texts with more patience. Her practice didn't change the headlines about healthcare, but it changed the tone of the hallway in her apartment building. The old man who lived on the third floor started sharing news about his garden. The delivery driver began to stop and chat. A small web of ease stitched itself into their lives. Mira collected these stories like seeds. She added them into class discussions, not as proof of a single moral, but as evidence of a method. Truth becomes a habit, she told her students, when it is given equal weight across different lives. Practice it for yourself and your small world will be the better for it. The language she used was practical, rehearsal, repetition, attentiveness. She avoided grand metaphors because they could distance learners from action. Not everyone took to it. Some students rolled their eyes. One of them, Kay, argued fiercely that truth must be challenged, that reverence could turn into blind obedience. Mira agreed. Reverence without thinking is dangerous, she said. But thinking without study practice often becomes only analysis, beautiful but useless. They tested both approaches. Kay led a debate club where members picked apart systemic assumptions, exposing weaknesses in every argument. Layla continued her quiet listening practice. Over time, they found that both were necessary. The debaters sharpened ideas. The practitioners softened the edges in daily life. When the two groups met at a neighborhood forum, the conversation shifted from abstract points to concrete projects, a free tutoring circle, a weekly cleanup, a mentorship program. The work required both critique and devotion. One rainy afternoon, a small library on the block announced it would close unless volunteers stepped forward. The response was modest at first. Then Sam the barista offered to host a book exchange at his cafe. Priya organized a roster for nurses to read to children on their days off. Mr. Alvarez donated crates of his battered books. Jonah and Kay designed a simple newsletter to coordinate the volunteers. They operated without fanfare. With that steady reverence, every action a repeating note in a larger melody. Mira noticed something else. When people treated a truth as their own responsibility, when they practiced it without needing applause, they stopped policing others. Equality meant assuming everyone was trying in their own imperfect way. It meant giving a teenager the space to figure out compassion, and giving a CEO the same chance to listen and change. It meant not assuming that your method was the only valid one. The college invited Mira to speak at the city's small civic center. Instead of grand statements, she told stories. She spoke of the barista who transformed his shift through a ritual, the nurse who changed her hallway, the students who started a library project. Truth, she said, isn't a trophy to be held aloft. It is an instruction for living spoken by someone, received by another, and proven in the daily acts that follow. Treat it with equal reverence in all lives. Practice it so it becomes habit. Be patient. Be humble. Afterwards, people came up to her with different reactions. Some were skeptical. A few confessed small experiments they had never shared. Many asked how to begin. Mira gave them the same advice she had given Jonah. Start with one small action, and do it again the next day. If it helps, invite a friend to join, but do not depend on applause. Measure success by whether your relationships are lighter, your headache less frequent, your mornings less rushed. Months became seasons, and seasons became a pattern in the neighborhood. The library stayed open. The newsletter grew. Not with flashy headlines, but with schedules: who would read, who would repair chairs, who would bring soup. People noticed minor changes in each other and treated them with the same interest they might show a houseplant that had finally bloomed. Mira walked more slowly now, not because she had all the answers, but because she had learned the rhythm of learning. She had discovered that understanding truth was only the first step. What mattered more was what people did with it. In classrooms, at markets, in elevators, in cafes. Truths were tested in small habits, a pause, a listening ear, a repeated kindness. They did not make the headlines. They changed the experience of living. On a mild spring morning, Jonah knocked on her classroom door with a list. I started a project with Kay, he said. We're organizing people not to preach, but to practice. We call it Practice Together. Mira smiled. What do you do? We pick one idea a month, Jonah said. This month it's attention, no phones during meals. People try it and report back. The point is not to make everyone the same. It's to give equal space for the idea to grow in every life. Mira thought of Mr. Alvarez reading in his stall, of Priya cooling down after a shift, Priya, of Sam speaking kindly to each customer. She felt less like someone with a polished message and more like a gardener tending plots that belonged to many hands. Then keep tending it, she said. And remember, truth stays true when we treat it with steady reverence. In small actions, equally offered to everyone. They left the classroom together, carrying the same cup of coffee between them, half for warmth, half for ritual. The city around them moved with the practical noise of modern life, bikes, buses, snippets of conversation. Yet beneath that noise, subtle patterns began to register, the sound of doors held, the cadence of patient sentences, the way people learned to listen and to try again. Life did not become perfect. It simply became the slow, steady experiment of making truth live in ordinary days.